Thanks for joining me this morning. With us today, we have Moshe Ferber, who's chairman of the Israeli chapter of the Cloud Security Alliance and a board member of Cybrella. And Cybrella is a cybersecurity consulting company who actually use the C3M's Cloud Control solution in their CISO as a service platform. So welcome, Moshe. We've also got Paddy Viswanathan with us. Paddy is the CEO and founder of C3M Cloud Control, and Paddy's joining us here this morning. The format here is pretty simple. We're going to have Moshe and Paddy give a quick intro to themselves, and then we're going to pass the baton over to Moshe, who's going to talk for about 20 minutes on cloud control and the challenges that CISOs specifically face. And then we're going to flip that over to Paddy, who's going to talk about, amongst other things, about how difficult it is to prioritize risk in the cloud environment. So we're aiming to keep this to an hour. So there will be Q&A opportunities at the end of the session. If you see the little Q&A box at the bottom of the Zoom screen, please feel free to ask questions, and then I'll field those and hand those out towards the end of the session. So like I said, should be about an hour or so. We'll definitely finish at the top of the hour. And thank you again for joining us. We really appreciate your time. We know it's valuable. So with that, let me just have Moshe and Paddy give a quick intro to themselves, and then we'll pass over to Moshe for his presentation. Moshe.
Yeah, thank you, Duncan. So my name is Moshe. I'm based in Israel. I've been in information security for the last 20 years. I'm going to introduce myself in more details when I talk about the slides, but just want to thank you for organizing this. Want to thank Paddy for joining me on this, and looking forward to hear what you have to say, what you are going to say. And thank you all attendees for joining us. Hope you enjoy this.
Good. Thank you, Moshe. Paddy.
Hi, everyone. I'll keep it short. My name is Paddy. I'm the founder and CEO at C3M. Would love to talk about some of the cloud security challenges that we have seen in the industry today, and would love to hear what Moshe has got to talk about cloud security in general. Thank you.
Good. Thank you, Paddy. So Moshe, I think you're going to share your screen, right? I think we're going to do that.
Let me know that it's working.
Yeah, we can see that perfectly. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to mute myself and let you walk through your slides.
So guys, welcome. Thank you for joining us. As I said, feel free to use the Q&A and chat box to communicate with us and ask questions as we go. I would try to be fast and efficient because we only have 20 minutes. So I've been in information security for the last 20 years. In the last 10 years, I've been working on cloud services, mainly because I was part of so many startups that 10 years ago started developing on top of cloud infrastructure, which gave me this expertise. I've been helping to create, I think, most of the popular certification in this area, if it's ISACA or IC Square or CSA certifications. And I'm also doing advisory board at Cybrella, which is basically a very special and boutique cyber services shop located in the East Coast. And again, thank you all for joining us. Let me begin. What I'm going to talk about. The Cloud Security Alliance is a global non-profit organization. They produce best practices for cloud security. I've been helping the Cloud Security Alliance to produce research and certifications and promoting the community throughout the world. One of the biggest research coming from the Cloud Security Alliance is the top threats to cloud computing. Currently, the latest version is the egregious 11, sorry. And what I'm going to do is review the different threats and talk to you and elaborate on events that happened and share a little bit knowledge about what happened and see what kind of conclusions and how we can make things different so these events will not be repeating. Okay, so the source of this presentation is the Cloud Security Alliance top threat document, and we are going to talk about the different threats happening. Just to make sure that everybody on the same page from terminology. So basically, we have a threat. When a threat is happening, there's some kind of effect to that. For instance, somebody can go into my house and steal something. This is the theft is the threat. They can take up a wallet not too big. I mean, the loss is not too big. The risk is not that big, but it can take all, I don't know, all my family jewelry, and that is a different risk. So a threat can be materialized into different risks, and threats and risk usually happen because of an attack vector. For instance, theft can happen because of an unsecured door or an open window. So in this conversation, I'm going to talk about the different threats, how they materialized into risk, and what were the attack vectors. Of course, for every risk and threat, there is mitigating controls, and Paddy, following me, will be talking about the different mitigating controls. So the Cloud Security Alliance says that there are 11 threats to cloud computing. We're going to review them and talk about events that happened due to that. And the first one is data breaches. And I think you see example of data breaches that happen, and data breaches can happen because of many reasons. But the first one is a misconfiguration. The second one is unintentional disclosure, when we unintentionally disclose our data, and we give example for those things that happen. But I want to jump to the next one. The main reason for data breaches is misconfiguration and inadequate change control. Misconfiguration, what do we mean by that? Well, basically in cloud environment and mostly in infrastructure as a service and platform as a service, the customer, not the provider, the customer, the cloud customer has so much responsibility, responsible for most of the configuration of the cloud services. And those platforms are very complicated. So when you sometimes misconfigure a service, the result will be a data breach, or in the end, headline in the newspaper probably. And I simply read the newspaper, and this is where I collect all those different events. One of the biggest vectors for misconfiguration is something that is called object storage, like S3 for AWS, or Azure blobs for Azure, for Microsoft Azure. Object storage is a very robust, very highly automated storage. It's quite unique. You don't see something like that in non-cloud environment, but because it's unique, because it's very, because it's complicated, because it has a couple of options, it's also because it's accessible from the internet, there are often misconfigurations that are related to those, to this object storage. And usually what is the scenario? People, I don't know, somebody in the operations or someone from the developers team need access to some kind of an object, a file on the object storage. They fail to get access to the storage, so they remove the permissions. It's simply, it's a right click and you say make public. And once they do that, there are always good souls that scan the internet and looking for those good souls, yeah, and not really in irony, they're always browsing the internet and looking for those open buckets, and this is where you get your newspaper headline. And there are many different controls, and Paddy probably will talk about the different controls that you can help us in mitigate these threats. And there are compensating controls and preventative controls and detective controls, and there are many ways to cope with it. And still, this is happening, and sometimes it is happening in magnitude. You see three examples of millions of people, details that were exposed due to misconfiguration of election systems. Yeah, in both in Israel, Mexico, and Brazil, and probably other places where I didn't have place in the slide to put them. So put a close eye on your object storage. The further threat I want to talk about is the lack of cloud security architecture and strategy. You see the first headline here. It was taken from an AWS technical forum that I had the chance to watch all what happened in live, as they say. I was browsing this forum and I saw this guy. He was begging for help. He was doing operations for a medical services company. The company has a product. They're monitoring the monitoring devices on customers' houses, devices that are connected to that are basically monitoring the health of the patients. And those guys moved to AWS, and the guy didn't have enough knowledge in order to troubleshoot the system, and at a certain point he lost connection to all of his medical devices. And this guy was begging to help on AWS forum. He says his patient's life are at danger. I mean, he doesn't have access. He doesn't know if somebody is now in trouble and need help, and he was really looking for somebody to help him. And this is what happens when you board a platform like a cloud platform, which again, as I said, they're complicated and they are very hard to configure, and you need to master those platforms in order to make sure that you have assurance in your environment. And many companies are doing the mistake and boarding those platforms without the proper knowledge. And this is where you get problems in your operations. If you're worried, somebody help, a couple of guys help this operation guy to get back the access to his medical devices, and hopefully nobody got hurt during this. But this is one example of what can happen when you board this, when you board those platforms without the proper strategy and without the proper architecture. Insufficient identity, credential, and access and key management. Identity is the core thing in the cloud environment. I mean, we can talk all day about firewall separations, and we can talk all day about, okay, muted, thank you. So we can talk all day about misconfiguration and network and firewalls. In the end, what separates between the different services, between a hacker and your data is often in the cloud, it's often a permission, a role, I don't know, a policy. There is no network separation. There is no, there is network separation, but often it is overcome by identity and roles and permissions. So first tip is pay a close attention on your identity management strategy. I'm pretty sure Paddy can add more on top of it, how to do this. Remember that about 8 out of 10 cloud incidents involve misplacing an API key. What is an API key or an access key? Different services need to talk to each other. The way that user is authenticated is a password. The way that services are authenticated with one another is API keys. Now, developers often are doing the mistake of misplacing those API keys and putting them in the wrong location, like configuration file. And statistics says that once these API keys are loaded into the code repository and are exposed, it takes less than 24 hours until somebody gets a hold on this key and try to do something against your cloud environment. So identity, role, list privileges, taking care of API keys, keeping them in a secure location. Don't put them in a configuration files. Store them in a secure vault. Those are all best practices that you need to adopt if you want to avoid this. Number 5, account hijacking. What you see over here on the right side, you see it's basically the stock market, the S&P 500 stock index. The moment that AP account was hijacked and somebody hacked in their name, that there was an explosion in the White House and Barack Obama was injured. Now, Associated Press, it's a news agency and they have a lot of followers. And the moment that Associated Press tweeted that, because of account hijacking, you see the results. Now, of course, Associated Press took incident response and took over the account again. And you see that the damage to the stock market quickly rose up, but somebody still were able to cause a lot of damage and maybe get some profit from this. And hijacking accounts get a lot of attention in the cloud, again, because everything is based on identity. The services are often standardized. So we see a lot of attacks on standardized services like Gmail and Office 365. What do I mean by standardized? When in the past, when every organization had its own email system, independent email system, attacker has to forge different authentication pages. Now that everybody using Office 365 and Gmail, it's easier to create fake login pages that looks like Office 365, because almost every company has the same page and the same format, and it's harder for our users to distinguish between a phishing site and a real site. And this is one of the challenges in the cloud. This is relevant mostly for software as a service, but also to infrastructure as a service and platform as a service. And the results of account hijacking in the cloud can be devastating for companies. One of the companies that are more famous about it, codespaces.com, a small company that was placed on top of AWS, they simply went out of business due to a hack that managed to get into their AWS account and basically deleted all their data. If you want to learn about this more, Google Codespaces or the headline that you see, murder in the Amazon cloud. It's a very fascinating story, and we can learn a lot from that. Inside threat, one of the hardest things to cope with when we talk about cloud is the insider threat. I mean, in the end, data centers are run by people, and if you're inside a data center, if one of the large cloud provider, you have a lot of power in your hands, because most of the world data is located in those data centers. And there are often cases of malicious insider. This could be malicious insider that is just an angry employee who got fired and decided to delete all the virtual servers. Remember, virtualization, I can install 1,000 servers in one click, the same way I can delete 1,000 servers in one click. So it goes, it's a double-edged sword in this way. So you have to pay a lot of attention to that. So sometimes the malicious insider can delete the data, sometimes they can produce espionage, sometimes they can harass your customers, as Gmail found out in one of those examples. Sometimes they can reveal the details of your customers, and those customers would go to jail, like the Twitter employee that was charged with spying after Saudi Arabia Twitter accounts. He was asked to track the real IP address of people who tweeted against the government of Saudi, against the king, and those guys, well, I'm assuming they didn't had such a good ending to this story. So again, it could be espionage, and it could be somebody deleting all your files. Malicious insider is very hard to cope with. You're mostly dependent on the cloud provider to do this. API is a big thing in the last couple of years. Basically, most of our B2B, business to business traffic has moved into APIs. Open banking, I have a lot of financial technology startups talking to bank over APIs. Most of the large websites and the cloud providers are offering API in order to people to access them. Facebook is offering API for different business partners. Basically, everybody are exposing APIs, and we don't have enough knowledge, and we don't have the expertise in order to protect those APIs at scales. And this is where you get your newspaper headline. And it's happened to small organizations, and it also happened to giant like Facebook or US Postal Services. APIs are hard to authenticate. They are very hard to authorize, and we don't have enough knowledge on how to monitor them. And so if you're exposing API to your business partner, pay a lot of attention to how you expose them securely. Number 8 is a weak control plane. I want to talk about something specific here on this. Something that was introduced, and we still don't have a name for that. Some people call it maybe financial DDoS or denial of wallet. The idea is that in a cloud environment, you are mostly utilizing services and you pay for what you consume. I'm talking mostly about this headline, okay? There are other things here, but I'm focusing on this one. I don't have a lot of time. So basically, you pay for what you consume. So if an attacker can cause you, for instance, if he can, if you pay for, I don't know, the number of times that you access a specific object on object storage, most of the object storage you pay for read and write access. So if he's able to have an access to your object storage and access different objects in it, they can produce you a bill that can grow and grow and grow again, and until a certain point you will have trouble dealing with your cloud provider. Okay, services like object storage you pay for read and write access. Services like Lambda and serverless you pay for a runtime. So if an attacker can cause a serverless function to run multiple times, you get to bill while they enjoy in their homes, see you suffer. And we see different examples for that. And this is a new type of attack that cloud providers will have to learn to cope with. And you currently, guys, have to learn to how to monitor this, make sure that you don't fail. Metastructure and applet structure failures, those are big words. On this one, I want to step a little bit from the CSI document and talk about the provider and the faults that they're causing us. As I said in the beginning, most of the incidents, most of the problems in cloud environment is usually because of misconfiguration of the customer, the one that is using the cloud services. Most often, often cloud providers know better how to defend themselves. With that said, there are often incidents that are related directly to the cloud provider, and you see it's happened to everyone. It's happened to Dropbox, it happened to Salesforce, it happens to Google, and it happens to Microsoft. Everybody lost customer data, and everybody basically put their customer data either at risk or make it unavailable, and sometimes lost it completely. If you're going to the cloud, make sure that you have the proper backups and disaster recovery, and often you need some kind of assurance to make your backup also outside of the cloud, sometimes because of the cloud provider faults, but also because of your faults. You can very easily, again, delete 1,000 servers, and if you don't have external cloud backup, there is really nothing you can do. So pay attention to your data. Limited cloud usage visibility. In the past, when, I don't know, the VP of marketing wanted to purchase an IT services, they had to go to the IT department, ask for a server, ask for allocation, ask for integration with the current IPs. In the cloud, all the VP of marketing need to do is pull up his credit card and board a new service for their organization, which means that there are multiple services that are going under the security and IT radar. We call this shadow IT. IT services that, again, are not going through the screening process of the IT department, so they have no knowledge of their existence, and this way they cannot secure it. Okay, so shadow IT is a big problem because IT and security are building so many controls, and in the end, the marketing VP simply bypass all these controls and upload all customers' data to the cloud without proper controls. So you need to develop ways to monitor cloud shadow IT, and make sure that you guys that you're dealing with don't put things in the cloud without the proper audit and knowledge. Okay. By the way, the most famous case of shadow IT is Hillary Clinton and the email server that she had in her basement, and it might have cost her the elections. I mean, we don't know what would happen if this didn't come to light. And the last one, and to wrap things up, abuse and nefarious use of cloud services. Sometimes in the cloud, I'm getting damaged, or I'm suffering because somebody else is abusing the cloud services to his own needs. Cloud services are often not blocked in the corporate IT, so they are very popular base for command and control botnets. Remember that every bot inside a network needs to communicate to some kind of command and control servers. Information security professionals invest a lot of time in detecting those command and control and blocking access to them. And if you're running your bot inside Twitter or Dropbox or a Google Drive, it's very unlikely that the security professional will block access to one of those services because they're heavily used. And this is a good way for the hackers to communicate with their bots. We see Twitter accounts that are tweeting commands to bot networks. We see pages hosted on Google Drive where the bot is accessing and getting instructions. And basically the cloud becomes a big giant pile of command and control botnets. And you have to also keep very good monitoring to make sure that you are not basically that you are not hosting on your cloud environment, that you're not hosting any of those CNC servers without your knowledge, and also make sure that none of your botnets are communicating with none of the bots in your network are communicating with a CNC in the cloud. It's very hard to monitor those stuff. Okay, so I had 30 minutes. I have 1 or 2 minutes to take questions if there are any.
Moshe, I think what we'll do is pass the presentation over to Paddy, and then we'll wrap up with some questions at the end. If you do have questions for Moshe, please use the Q&A session. You can see that at the bottom of the screen, and we'll try and wrap up with the questions after Paddy has presented. Moshe, thank you very much. That was excellent, very thought-provoking. Lot to chew on there. Paddy, are you able to share your screen? Is that your intention?
Sure, I am. Let me.
There you go.
See my screen?
Yep, see it perfectly. Great. Okay.
First of all, thanks everyone for joining. Moshe, that was brilliant. I was just taking a couple of notes on the API use case and the account hijacking use case that you were mentioning, and probably run through a couple of examples how we correlate that in cloud security solutions. Everyone, my name is Paddy Viswanathan. I'm the founder and CEO at C3M. Around 18 to 19 years experience in the industry. Come from a technology background. I've been an architect around, not just around cloud, but in IT in general. And that's helped a lot of organizations migrate to the cloud in the last 10, 15 years, especially when cloud was at its very nascent stage. So I've sort of witnessed real hand the challenges that organizations face when they sort of migrate from a data center driven world to the cloud. And I've seen the mistakes people make, and some of those have inspired us to create a product that helps organizations migrate securely to the cloud, enforce controls on the cloud. And over the last 5-6 years, based on some of the examples, threats, use cases that Moshe mentioned, the security landscape in the cloud has evolved, and with that, the solutions that cater to that. So I'll talk about how the industry has changed and open challenges today, and how the average enterprise today is struggling to get a handle around cloud security in general. But the gist of it starts with this shared responsibility model, which is common. This is what all AWS, Google, Azure cloud service providers say, that they are responsible for their compute, storage, database, networking. As a customer, you're essentially signing up to an AWS account or a Google's project or an Azure subscription, and then transferring your data there, spinning up your virtual machines there. Now, anything that you do in that space is your responsibility, and that's where there is a lot of gray area. Every time we talk to customers, the underlying impression as well, we are using that service from AWS, So we are assuming that they take care of that part of the responsibility. Well, no. AWS does provide you that service, but how you configure that service, how you provide permissions to that service, all of that is your responsibility. In your traditional data center world, you have the perimeter protecting. You have a firewall. You can just put a firewall around everything, and wish that you're okay. At least I have the notion of being secure. But in the cloud, there is nothing like that. There are a multitude of ways in which your data or your servers can get exposed, and there are a multitude of ways in which identities can be associated to each of your components in the cloud. It could be data, it could be storage, it could be networks. You have to understand that. You have to understand, your security teams need to understand, and you have to put controls in place to ensure that these are good, or at least following good practices. And if you look at the segmentation in the space, Gartner says, well, we've sort of divided the space into 5. There is CASB, where you can sort of understand who's doing what in your enterprise, what SaaS services are they accessing, what files are they uploading, etc. Then there is a workload protection platform where you can understand what are these vulnerabilities, misconfigurations on your actual servers, your Kubernetes clusters. A lot of organizations are going the containerization route now, so everything around that. Then there is the posture management piece, which is very similar to locking your gates and ensuring that nobody can come in, locking your windows, making sure that you're not left anything open. And that's what a CSPM solution does. Scans using API based access and ensures that you have configured everything as they should be. And what is as they should be? Well, it depends. It could be guidelines that, for example, as Moshe was explaining, it could be guidelines that CSA says. You could comply with CSA standards. You could comply with CIS benchmarks. You could say that I want to comply with general AWS best practices, etc. And then there is the problem of identity governance, right? That is, all of us are very familiar. This is not a new problem. And the problem of who's having access to certain environments, who can do what, what sort of destructive permissions do they have, and do they really need that? These are general questions, but in the cloud, it is becoming very complex because many organizations adopt a multi-cloud posture today, and there are a lot of differences in how AWS does identity governance versus GCP versus Azure. So understanding and getting a good grip around your identities, the permissions they have is a challenge. And then CNAPP is a convergence of these platforms where you can sort of look at your cloud post infrastructure posture, your platform posture, your application posture. And in C3M, what we're trying to do is help customers, apart from the CASB use case, which we don't help with today, everything else, CWPP, CSPM, CIAM, CNAPP, and even infrastructure as code security, I'll come to that in a bit, are things that an enterprise buyer looking for a cloud security platform will definitely have on their checklist. And if you look at a couple of the key items that Moshe was highlighting, API keys getting compromised, accounts, how does account hijacking happen in the cloud? How do you ensure your identities are provisioned correctly? He was also highlighting the Capital One breach. Now, Capital One, one of the pioneers in cloud security, they also released an open source cloud security software, which I used to refer in my initial days. You would think, how would an organization like that get breached, right? Because they are sort of leading innovation on that front, and that's where a key point comes in. As far as the cloud is concerned, you could have a lot of findings from a cloud perspective. You are spinning up compute, you are creating networks, you're having storage elements in the cloud, you're spinning up or creating identities in the cloud, you're associating all of these together. Now, from a best practice perspective, a CSA or a CIS benchmark is going to tell you, well, you've not done all of these checks. Like, you've maybe not enabled encryption, you've not enabled versioning, you've not enabled tagging. Along with that, if you misconfigure your firewalls, or if you give a lot of wide open access to your storage, very simple misconfigurations can expose your entire data to the public internet. Those are things that combine together. Now, as a security professional, if you look at the realm of responsibilities, there are two things. One, you want to make sure that your organization is having a good posture on the cloud. Every CISO would want that. Okay, can I have good granular enforcement of controls on the cloud? But the people, this metric here, 78% of security teams lack training in cloud security, it's a very, very important metric, because as we work with organizations around the globe, what we're seeing is the people who work on this, who actually get the findings from these, they do not understand the nuances between identities in AWS or GCP or Azure. For them, the ask is, hey, can we quickly understand out of AWS and Azure clouds that my organization uses, can I quickly see what is the top risk for our organization? And that's not easy today, right? You go to any solution, it's going to tell you have 10,000 issues to fix in your cloud accounts. And that could be a combination of best practices like versioning, encryption, tagging, plus some real threat related issues. Your firewalls are open, your data is exposed to the internet. Now, how do you understand what is real risk to your enterprise? It could also be that some of these findings are from a test environment versus some of them are in a production environment. Now, that prioritization is a lot of organizations struggle with, and most CISOs are saying, hey, we are not ready to go full-fledged into the cloud until we can sort of get granularity into the controls that we can enforce. And now cloud service providers, all of them, AWS, GCP, Azure, have their own inbuilt security modules. Many organizations start with that. The problem is when you start adopting a multi-cloud posture and want to sort of enforce the same set of controls from an enterprise standpoint across all those clouds, it doesn't scale. Now you find that, we have one way of enforcing controls in AWS, another way of enforcing controls in GCP, and that's not going to go well. So when we designed our product, one of the main considerations that we were looking at is, hey, let us look at the enterprise buyer persona. What would you look for if your organization is moving to the cloud and you're tasked with securing it, or there are multiple personas there, security, compliance. How do you create a solution that caters to all of this? And the average enterprise today uses 3 or 4 solutions to address cloud security. They have CSPM solutions, CIEM solutions, they are agent-based solutions for addressing workload protection, and then they have solutions around automating incidents in the cloud. So you, as an end user, if you imagine you are using these 4 products from 4 different companies, there's a lot of swell sharing to do, right? You're allowed to say, okay, for CSPM, let me look here. For CIEM, let me look here. For automating it, let me look there. So we wanted to come up with a unified cloud security management, and that's our product vision too. When we started, this infrastructure as code security, number 1, is something that we just launched. But if you look at what we had initially, the storyline starts from number 2, CSPM. We started with CSPM. We added on a risk scoring module for the cloud, which is very important, because when you have 2 or 3 people working on your cloud findings, and they're tasked with identifying top risk vectors or threat vectors in the cloud, out of those 10,000 issues, the solution should be able to clearly tell them, hey, prioritize these 5 over the remaining, because these 5 can really be catastrophic to your organization. Once you understand your posture and you understand your risk, you then need to investigate that, right? Before you take an action. Well, how did this misconfiguration occur? Who did that change? How were they able to make that change? Which entity gave them the permission to make that change? And that's a lot of questions around identities, their governance, the permissions that are associated with that. That's the whole CIEM, or you can call it identity governance. Gartner calls it CIEM. In the European region, it's called cloud permissions management, but a big animal in itself. And then once you get a handle on all of this, most security teams realize that we are not going to be able to fix this manually, because you have 5,000, 10,000, and as your organization's cloud footprint increases day by day, these best practice findings are going to increase. And without automation in place, there is no way you're going to get a handle over it. And in our design philosophy, that's one main item that we added. Okay, let's create a module. Let's modularize it so that even if you are looking at from an organization starting their cloud journey, they don't have to take all of this upfront. Let's say they want to start with cloud posture management, they can. After they get to understand their posture, they say, okay, we need this capability to investigate these. We now understand how to investigate. You can add on the identity part. And then automation, we have a very decoupled framework which is extendable. If you have time, we'll probably get to that in the demo. Now, one major item in today's world is, you could do all of this, but you're still detecting stuff after that has happened, right? It could be in AWS, GCP, Azure, but if you look at how cloud infrastructure is getting created today across the globe, majority of the organizations are adopting some sort of an infrastructure as code security standard. And the most common one is Terraform. There are cloud native solutions like CloudFormation, Google Deployment Manager, ARM templates from Azure. But that's how infrastructure gets created. Now, as an organization CISO, a CIO, if you look at your current cloud estate and figure out, well, your teams have to look at 50,000 issues, 100,000 issues growing day by day, you will know that that's a losing challenge, right? You're not going to fix that. You're not going to catch up. The only way is to prevent it at source, right? When people are writing that code or creating that infrastructure using code. So if you could take the whole set of policies that a CSPM solution can have and apply it to your infrastructure as code, now that becomes a very clean, consistent way of starting your security journey from the extreme left, right? When your development teams are creating that infrastructure, then you can use the same policy language to start enforcing controls from CSPM angle, from an identity angle, and even from an automation angle. Any major enterprise today, even our major competitors today, they've all acquired these by acquiring companies. At C3M, all of these capabilities have been built organically, which means by design, all of these modules talk to each other. You don't have to work hard to connect each of these. We provide you a seamless, unified way of enforcing cloud security from the left. And some of the cloud security issues as they happen today. Visibility is a key thing for any organization. You need to understand what is there in your cloud, your misconfigurations. Compliance is a big use case. Whether you want to comply with CSA controls or GDPR controls or ISO controls, every organization, based on the geography they are, will have this requirement. How do you detect threats real time? How do you respond to that real time? How do you understand your identities? How do you quantify your risk posture? And in general, how do you do identity governance also in the cloud? And one important metric, and I'm reiterating this, is majority of the hacks today happen not because organizations are not able to detect issues. Even a native AWS solution or a Azure solution would be able to tell you, hey, you have misconfigured something correctly. But most of the time, those results in false positives. You don't care if a firewall is open in a region where you don't have anything. There is nothing behind that firewall. When there are 10 issues like that, right? Let's say you have 10 findings like that, firewall open to the internet. The one that does not have anything behind it should be deprioritized. And the one that is having a database running behind it or a server running behind it with a lot of permissions associated to that server should be prioritized. And what if that server is in a network that is peer connected to another network? Your whole blast radius expands. That's where scenarios like account hijacking comes in. Somebody can come in and just take over your whole account because they can get access to the VM. The VM has a lot of identity permissions attached to it that the attacker can use to elevate their permissions. And if you are effectively able to reduce your mean time to detect and your mean time to respond, that's when you can say that as a security team, well, we now have a good handle. We look at the incidents that are coming in and how we are triaging it. Now, these are the typical personas to which we cater: GRC teams, compliance auditors, your great reporting metrics for CISOs, IAM teams, and SOC teams. And since we're running out of time, let me quickly get to the platform. So, we have made it pretty simple over here. As an administrator, you would log in to the C3M platform, connect your cloud estate here. And it's a very simple process. Come in over here, say, I want to onboard my AWS account, give a friendly name for that. Then say, okay, I want to onboard it in a monitor mode or a monitor and remediate. First one, we tell you how to fix the issues. Second one enables playbooks in C3M, which can automatically fix that for you. And then go ahead and give your credentials, read-only credentials, for us to monitor your account. And again, reminding everyone that we do not use agents. It is 100% API based. You can just connect your accounts here. Immediately, they get baselined against industry benchmarks. And you can see these are all policies. For example, ensure no EC2 instances, servers in AWS, allow public access on SSH port. This is why it is a best practice. This is how you can fix it manually. And behind everything, we have a query language that we have custom built. And this is one of our biggest USPs. You can use this to extend and create your own policies. And all of these policies that you see are derivatives of, say, for example, CIS benchmarks, CSA version 3.0.1, FedRAMP, GDPR, a lot of compliance packs that we ship out of the box. Once your account is onboarded, you can immediately see the poster. Okay, how many policies are violating? How many of them are critical, high, medium, low? How many resources did we discover? How many of those resources are non-compliant? You can immediately see that. Lambda functions, you have a lot of issues. Security groups, you have a lot of issues. You can also go and see what is your inventory. And this is a big ask from everyone. We need to understand what we have in your cloud. And you can see, well, for AWS, across all of the AWS accounts that you've onboarded, across all of the regions in AWS, and this is a consolidated view. You're saying, okay, you have these many compute, these many networks, these many storage, and these many IAM. Because essentially, you could switch to Google, and it is all going to remain the same: compute, network, storage, IAM. The services under that may differ. Then a geographical view of where your resources are. You could quickly see, okay, South America, we don't operate there. What do we have over there? And you can see, well, there are some sub-networks which are non-compliant. Click on that and it takes you to the detailed inventory screen where you can see, well, these are the 6 non-compliant ones. I can switch to AWS and say, okay, I want to see how many resources here. You can see, okay, show me all the resources that are not tagged. And then you can ask questions around the tagging feature, etc. So we have seen policies, we have seen inventory. Then every policy that violates in the system may have multiple resources violating that. For example, S3 buckets not encrypted may have hundreds of S3 buckets not violating that. And that's essentially something that your teams have to start fixing. So if you want to understand, hey, how many issues do we have in the cloud? How do we have to fix it? You can see your multi-cloud view here. Across AWS, Google, Azure, I have these many issues to fix. This is what is currently happening in my cloud. This is where I'm impacted the most. We have a lot of data protection issues, logging issues, data exposure issues, network port security issues. And you can deep dive. You can say, okay, let me look at AWS. And there are 1,140 findings over here. And how do you understand what is your big risk in the cloud? And that's where we introduce this risk score here. We are following the CVSS risk score pattern here. It's based on a 0 to 10, where we figure out your exposure, exploitability, blast radius for every cloud entity. And here you can say, okay, let me look at the severe findings here. And you can see that there are a lot of things that are a 9 or a 10. And you can say, okay, ensure EC2 instances allowing public access on port 22. This is a 10. Let me investigate this. You can see CVSS score came back as 10, impact factor came back as 10, severity came back as 10. And you want to understand what is the exploitability here, you can see, okay, hey, this is attached to the security group, it is allowing traffic from the internet. It is also associated with an IAM role that is granting 4 sensitive permissions, very important, because you can see that this server, if it gets exploited, can lead to a account takeover itself, because you essentially giving that person the ability to elevate their whole permissions, and the business impact is very high because it matches one of the tags that you have put as business impact for your organization. So you can define all of these tags in C3M, and any time we find an asset that matches that, we bring it up in your risk score, because this is how you can prioritize. You don't care if some of these assets are having some sort of misconfigurations but are in your dev or QA environments, but if it is in prod and if it is a critical application, it matters. I was just highlighting one example of EC2, but let's say you can look at a basic S3 bucket encrypted policy, look at the contributing factor. Why should I prioritize this? Well, you should prioritize this because it is storing CloudTrail logs. CloudTrail logs keep a record of all API calls done on your AWS accounts. This way, we are helping the analyst understand out of all of those 1,000 issues, you go ahead and prioritize these 22 issues, because these can really harm you if left unattended. And then there is a compliance view where you can come in and you're seeing a list of compliance pack that is enabled by default. We support around 12 or 13 compliance packs. You can go ahead and enable the ones that are needed. In this instance, we have just enabled this for demonstration. And in this example, for example, CSA, the 301, you're looking at, okay, out of 31 controls, only 3 are compliant, or PCI. I want to understand why out of 20 controls, only 3 are compliant. You can click on it and it takes you to a compliance screen where you can see all of your compliance controls. And you can say, okay, 8.2, this control is looking weak. Why is it 3 out of 9? Expand it, and you can see, well, that's because your IAM password policies in AWS have not been set up correctly. You could export it, send it over to your IAM teams to start fixing this. And as they start fixing it, this control will start turning green. And you can sort of extract the same set of information in a reporting screen also. So if you have reporting requirements, you can come in over here, create your own PDF reports or your Excel reports around each cloud service provider. And then you can also schedule those reports so that you can receive them on a Monday or a Tuesday or quarterly, etc. And we're looking at the CSPM side here. Now, how about identities? How do I understand what is happening on my cloud infrastructure? And that's where this new module helps. You can come in and see, hey, across my entire cloud infrastructure, this is what is currently happening. Last 24 hours, these are the activities that have been happening on my cloud infrastructure. We're seeing traffic from here. We're seeing a lot of event failures. These are the events that are failing. This is where we see traffic from. And if you want to audit a user or an identity, you can just use our audit capability where you come in over here and say, hey, I want to understand what did this particular C3M user do. And you can quickly see, okay, this user has been logging in from an AWS internal IP, has been doing a lot of customer managed keys decryption, and you can see all the activities that they have done. You can click on the event and see the actual metadata about the event, and a lot of auditing options here. You can clear this and then say go by event name, by operation name. Essentially, it gives you one unified way of auditing identities across AWS, GCP, or Azure. It remains the same for everything. You do not have to understand how AWS works or GCP works or Azure works. Auditing an user is the same way. You come in over here, look up that user, understand what the user has been doing. It could be a service account, it could be an IAM role for that matter. And the permission analyzer feature from C3M helps you understand what are the permissions that are associated with users and how many of them are using those permissions, how many, for example, data flow, custom role. This user has been granted 8 out of 56 permissions. You can expand it and then see who's using what, who's not using permissions, etc. So, the IAM piece, the IAC module here, we don't have time to go over it, but it gives you a lot of control over scanning your infrastructure as code. And then we have a lot of playbook features in C3M, which helps you automate your response to cloud security incidents. But in the interest of time, let me halt there, see if there are questions.
Scratch the surface, I think, is what we can say. There's a lot more to this than what we can cram into this brief session. So thank you very much for that.
Sure.
Moshe, do you have any closing observations or comments you'd like to leave with the people here on the webinar?
Well, just to conclude, first of all, thank you for a very interesting presentation, Paddy, and good luck with everything you're doing. I'm pretty sure a lot of customers need this. Bottom line, cloud brings so many benefits. I mean, it's amazing what the stuff they can build. And for me, coming from a startup world, it's amazing. You can build real applications with little resources. But again, it all comes down to how knowledgeable you are in those platforms. Those platforms are complicated. It is very hard. It's a steep learning curve, and you have to master those if you want to protect your data. And it's education, knowledge, and of course, using the right tools.
Absolutely, absolutely. Paddy, from your perspective, anything you'd like to leave us with to chew on?
Well, from what I'm seeing, enterprises are already on the cloud. Most of them are using multi-cloud. And, when you're looking at getting a good posture around your cloud, you need to make sure that the teams who are working on your posture truly understands the cloud. Today, we see a lot of disconnect in narrowing down incidents in the cloud, and the gap is because they're not equipped with the right tools, they're not equipped with the right information at the right time, and that can be the deciding factor between a breach and intrusion.
Right, it's the old alert fatigue story, right?
Yeah.
Okay, great. Well, we're bumping up on the hour, so in the interest of time, I'm going to wrap this up. If you want to take
have you seen there's a question in the chat?
Let me just have a look. Does C3M work with existing security products like Microsoft Sentinel, or does it replace other solutions? Do you want to?
Yes, so yeah.
Thank you for the question, Mike.
Correct. So Mike, yes, it does. It can be a complementary solution to Sentinel, but it goes above and beyond what Sentinel can offer today, because what we're saying is, starting from your infrastructure as code to your CSPM, to your CWPPs, your CIM, we can ensure your one way of enforcing those policies across your cloud spectrum, and that's where there is a true differentiator.
Thank you, Mike. Thanks for the question. If anybody here wants to take a closer look at the C3M platform, we can obviously set up a demo for you to walk you through the platform and show you how we give you real control of your cloud security posture. I'll reach out to each of you in the next few days to see if there's any interest in a deeper dive. Thank you for your time. We do appreciate it. We know it's valuable. Paddy, thank you very much for your session. Moshe, thank you. We hope you've enjoyed the session. We're going to probably run some more of these over the next few weeks, and I'll make sure everybody's notified that times and dates when they materialize. So thanks again. Have a great rest of your day, and thanks for your time.